When billionaire Damian Vale dared bartender Isla Rios to dance for $10,000, he thought it would be nothing more than a joke, a way to show off his power in front of his friends. But the moment Isla stepped into the light, everything changed. Her dance wasn't for money or pride. It was a storm of truth that stripped away his arrogance and exposed a side of humanity money could never buy. What began as humiliation became redemption, and one bold act on a New York rooftop would rewrite both of their lives forever. If you believe in stories where pride falls and purpose rises, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video, because this one will move your heart before the music even ends. The city lights of Manhattan sparkled like jewels against the darkening sky. The Halcyon Room stood high above it all on the 57th floor of Vesper Tower, with glass walls that made it feel like a floating palace. The air smelled of truffle oil, citrus, and expensive perfume. Jazz hummed softly through the speakers, while laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses filled the air. Waiters glided between tables dressed in black and white, carrying plates that cost more than most people's rent. Behind the bar, Isla Rios worked with silent precision. Her hands moved fast, steady, and sure as she poured, shook, and stirred drinks for the city's richest crowd. She didn't look at them, not out of fear, but because her focus was her shield. To her, every drink was a performance, and perfection was her only applause. At the far corner of the room, Damian Vale entered with two business partners, Oliver Hart and Priya Nair. He walked with the quiet confidence of a man used to owning everything he touched. His sharp navy suit reflected the golden lights, and his watch, a Patek Philippe, flashed under the chandelier. The group had come to celebrate their latest victory, a takeover that crushed a smaller company overnight. Damian was proud, not because of the win, but because it reminded everyone in the financial world that Vale Capital always got what it wanted. The waiter led them to the VIP corner, and the moment they sat, the tone of the room shifted. Eyes followed him, some admiring, others cautious. Damian thrived on that kind of power. It made him feel alive. From her place behind the counter, Isla saw him too. Everyone did. But to her, he was just another polished face with an ego built from money. She shook a paper plane cocktail, Aperol, bourbon, lemon juice, quick, rhythmic, like muscle memory. She lined up coupe glasses, wiping the rims clean before filling them to the exact millimeter. Not a drop spilled. Gordon Pierce, the bar manager, gave a silent nod of approval. Isla's routine was her armor. Every pour, every turn, every breath kept her steady. Behind her calm face, her mind replayed numbers, hospital bills, due dates, her brother Mateo's medication schedule. She couldn't afford mistakes, not even one. This bar, this job, was her lifeline. Across the room, Damian tilted his drink, watching the amber liquid swirl. His perfectionism was legendary. Even now, he adjusted the placement of his untouched glass until it aligned with the edge of the marble table. Oliver teased him about it, but Damian only smirked. "Control is art," he said. That same control was what made him notice Isla. The way she moved, swift, composed, not a gesture wasted, drew his attention. He saw grace, but not the kind that impressed him. To him, it looked like submission, a woman trained to serve without question. He didn't see strength, he saw silence. That misjudgment would soon become his greatest mistake. A voice broke through the music, a complaint from the VIP booth near the window. "This isn't the Macallan 1926 I asked for," a man barked. Gordon started forward, but Isla was already there. She replaced the glass with a gentle apology and poured the right vintage herself. No excuses, no explanations. The angry customer blinked, disarmed by her calm tone. Within seconds, the tension melted, and the man muttered something about fine service. Gordon gave Isla a small nod. "Good work," he murmured as she returned to the bar. It wasn't much, but coming from Gordon, it meant everything. She smiled faintly, wiping down the counter. The music faded for a moment as the band took a break. The hum of conversation filled the gap, but something in the air had changed. Without the music, the rhythm of the night slowed. The lights shimmered against the bar's mirrored walls. People started to notice Isla, her quiet focus, the way she balanced elegance and endurance. Damian's gaze followed her. She moved like someone who once knew the stage. He didn't know her story, and he didn't care to. All he saw was someone beneath him, someone he could test. A mix of expensive whiskey and arrogance stirred a dangerous thought in his mind. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his platinum card against the table. Oliver glanced at him warily, sensing trouble brewing. Priya raised an eyebrow, silently warning him to let it go. But Damian's pride had already taken over. He lifted his hand, catching Isla's attention. His voice carried across the bar, smooth but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You," he said, pointing casually with his card. "Come here." The room fell quiet, the kind of silence that only money could command. Isla hesitated for half a breath before walking toward the VIP booth. Her hands stayed behind her back, posture straight, eyes neutral. "Yes, sir," she asked politely. Damian smiled, but it wasn't kind. "I've got a simple challenge for you," he said, leaning forward. $10,000 to dance for us right now. Let's see if you're more than a drink mixer." Gasps rippled through the tables. A few people lifted their phones, recording. Others looked away, ashamed to watch but unable to stop listening. Gordon froze behind the counter, his face pale. He took a step forward, but Amelia Cho, Damian's chief of staff, quietly caught his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "You'll make it worse." Her expression was unreadable, but there was tension in her jaw. Damian waited, expecting laughter or fear. Instead, Isla's lips parted slightly, and for a split second, her eyes flickered with pain. Then she smiled, not the nervous kind, but calm, sharp, and controlled. "10,000, you said?" she asked softly. He nodded, smirking. "If you think you can earn it." Isla straightened. "Then you'll pay up front," she replied. The quiet confidence in her voice made a few people whisper. Damian laughed, waving his card at a waiter. "Fine. You've got yourself a deal." The waiter brought over the portable card reader, and Damian slid his card through without looking at the total. A few buttons pressed, a soft beep, and the machine printed the receipt. He tore it off, holding it out like a trophy. "Here's your prize," he said. Isla took it without a tremor. She folded the slip neatly and tucked it into the front pocket of her apron. Then she looked around the room. "I'll need a little space," she said simply. Her voice was calm but steady enough that people actually moved their chairs aside. The live band's pianist, Eddie Mendez, looked at her curiously from the corner. "You want music?" he asked. Isla shook her head. "Not yet," she said. Her tone left no room for argument. She untied her black apron, placing it carefully on the bar counter. Then she reached behind her head, pulling the pins from her tightly wound bun. One by one, her dark waves fell loose, catching the golden light. The transformation was quiet but striking. The bartender uniform became something else entirely, an armor shed, a story revealed. She slipped off her low heels and stepped barefoot onto the cold marble floor. A soft murmur spread through the crowd. Even Damian leaned forward, his smirk fading slightly. To him, it had started as a game, but the air now carried a strange electricity he didn't understand. For the first time that night, Isla wasn't just a face behind the bar. She was the center of the room. Inside her chest, her heart pounded, but not from fear. This moment wasn't about pride or revenge. It was about survival. Her brother Mateo lay in a hospital bed at New York Presbyterian, fighting a disease that made every day a battle. His next treatment was due Monday. $10,000 meant another round of therapy, another chance to keep him smiling. Isla had promised him that she'd find a way, and she kept her promises. As the crowd stared, waiting for her to embarrass herself, Isla closed her eyes. She could still hear her dance teacher's voice from years ago at the Ailey studio. "Dance your truth, not your fear." That memory steadied her breathing. When she opened her eyes, the whole room seemed to blur except for the small space ahead of her. One spotlight glowed above, a single amber beam breaking through the dim gold light. She took one step forward, then another. The marble was cold beneath her feet, grounding her. Damian watched, curious but uneasy. He had expected shame. What he didn't know was that he had just paid to see his own arrogance unravel. Isla took her final breath before the first movement, her hands lifting slowly as if she was reaching through the air for something lost. The crowd held its breath. Even the city lights outside seemed to pause. And then, with the stillness of a storm about to begin, Isla Rios began to dance. Isla lifted her arms slowly, her fingers trembling as if feeling the weight of invisible chains. The movement wasn't pretty, it was raw. She wasn't dancing to please anyone. Her steps were full of tension and release, every motion telling a story of pain, strength, and defiance. She took one slow step forward, her shoulders rolling, her spine bending and straightening in rhythm with her heartbeat. The crowd leaned closer, drawn in by something they couldn't name. It wasn't burlesque. It wasn't entertainment. It was truth. Her feet slid softly against the marble, her toes gripping the cold surface like roots holding on for life. Her body moved as though the air itself was pulling at her, but she refused to fall. She was showing the crowd that survival could be graceful too. A man near the front lowered his phone. The woman beside him did the same. One by one, people forgot to record. Their screens dropped to their laps, replaced by wide, astonished eyes. The clinking of ice in glasses stopped. Even the air conditioner seemed to quiet down. The golden light from the chandeliers shimmered across Isla's hair as she turned. Her face wasn't that of a servant anymore. It was the face of someone who had seen both beauty and pain and decided to merge them into one. Damian's lips parted slightly, confusion flickering through his arrogant calm. He had seen dancers before, professionals, entertainers, but none like this. This was not a performance for applause. It was a confrontation. It was a mirror being held up to every soul in the room. Isla bent low, one hand brushing the marble floor before rising again, her movements sharp and deliberate. It was ballet and something more, raw, street-born, fearless. Her turns were clean, ending in knife-still lines that made even the air hesitate. Her shadow followed her across the glossy surface, long and strong. Inside her mind, memories flashed like lightning. Her younger self at the Ailey Studios, the joy of getting her first scholarship, the ache of losing it when Mateo got sick. She saw hospital corridors, white walls, and the endless buzz of machines. She saw her mother's dance shoes boxed away after the accident, and her promise to never stop moving. Each thought poured through her body, transforming grief into grace. Every spin, every rise and fall was a memory stitched into motion. Damian's smirk slowly vanished. At first, he had waited for the humiliation he'd paid for, but what he got instead was reverence. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, unable to look away. Her body was telling a story far too honest for the kind of power he was used to. There was no flattery, no attempt to please. It was craft, pure, disciplined, unbending. It wasn't about him anymore, and that truth cut deep. Around him, his partners sat silent. Priya's eyes were glassy. Oliver exhaled slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. Even Amelia Cho, who rarely showed emotion, had one hand over her heart. In that moment, Damian saw the cruel arrogance of what he had done. He had tried to buy a soul and instead discovered one too great to own. Eddie, sensing the change in the air, reached for the piano and pressed a single key. A soft, trembling note filled the silence. He held it, letting the sound stretch and fade like a breath. Isla didn't look at him, but she heard it. Her movements shifted slightly, her rhythm syncing with the sound but never surrendering to it. The note wasn't leading her, it was following her. For those watching, it was as if time had slowed. Each gesture, each flick of her hand carried emotion heavy enough to make strangers tear up. The people who had come to drink and gossip now found themselves trapped in something sacred. Damian's chest tightened. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because someone had power over him, but because someone had reminded him what true power looked like. As the note faded, Isla's dance grew bolder. She moved diagonally across the floor, her bare feet gliding and then pounding softly like a heartbeat. The marble caught her reflection, two versions of herself, one grounded, one breaking free. Her arms swung wide, her fingers cutting through the air like words unspoken. Her face showed pain, not of defeat, but of release. She turned, jumped, spun again. The diagonal of jetés wasn't a plea, it was a refusal. Her body screamed without sound, "I am not for sale." Each line of movement was a protest, each pause a declaration. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she didn't wipe it away. She was beyond pride now, beyond fear. Her truth filled the room, seeping into every corner, even the heart of the man who had dared her. When the final sequence came, Isla slowed down. The energy that had filled the air now folded into calm strength. She dropped to one knee, then slowly straightened her back, her chin rising in quiet defiance. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths. There was no collapse, no tears, no weakness, only dignity. The room held its breath with her, caught in that single moment of stillness. Damian felt his throat tighten, a strange warmth building behind his eyes. Around him, no one moved. It was as if the entire skyline outside had frozen to watch her. For the first time in the Halcyon Room's history, silence was applause. And then, a single sound broke it, a soft clap. It came from Amelia Cho. Her hands met once, twice, and then again louder. Within seconds, the sound spread like fire. One clap became 10, 10 became 100. Soon, the entire room was standing, clapping, cheering, crying. Waiters, patrons, even the band joined in. It wasn't polite applause, it was the roar of awe. Some people shouted bravo. Others simply wiped their eyes, unable to explain why they were moved. Damian remained seated, his heart pounding in shame and wonder. The applause wasn't for him or his challenge. It was for the woman who had taken his insult and turned it into art. Isla stood still, her expression calm. She didn't bow or smile. She didn't need to. She had said everything without words. When the noise began to fade, Isla turned away from the crowd. Her steps were slow, quiet, deliberate. She walked back to the bar, where her black heels and apron waited. The marble floor bore the faint marks of her dance, tiny smudges of sweat and grace. Gordon stood behind the counter, his eyes wide, hands trembling slightly. She handed him her keys. "I'm taking the early leave," she said softly. Gordon nodded, his voice caught in his throat. "Go ahead, Isla," he whispered. There was pride in his tone, not pity. She slipped on her shoes, pinned her hair back up, and picked up the folded receipt that now felt heavier than gold. Behind her, applause still echoed, but she didn't turn around. Damian half rose from his seat, his hand twitching as if to stop her. But before he could move, Amelia's hand landed gently on his arm. "Not now," she said quietly, her eyes firm. "Don't make this about you." The words hit him harder than any insult. He sank back into his chair, staring at Isla's retreating figure. She didn't even glance his way. She didn't need to. The lesson was already written across his conscience. As she stepped into the elevator, the doors closing behind her, he felt the strange emptiness of victory turned hollow. Around him, people were still talking about her, about what they'd just witnessed, but Damian didn't hear them. His own silence was punishment enough. Downstairs, the elevator doors opened to a quiet lobby. The hum of the city greeted Isla like an old friend. She stepped out, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. The night air was cold, sharp, but it felt cleaner than the air upstairs. She walked toward the exit, exhaling deeply, as though letting go of the weight that had followed her for years. In her pocket, the folded receipt pressed against her palm, a reminder of how far she would go for her brother, for dignity, for herself. She didn't know that her performance would soon leave the Halcyon Room behind. She didn't know it had already begun spreading, faster than fire, through the world above her. Upstairs, a young busser named Eli stood near the bar, his phone still warm in his hand. He had recorded the whole thing, a shaky but clear video of the impossible moment when a bartender silenced New York's wealthiest crowd with nothing but truth and grace. He didn't mean harm, he just wanted to remember it. But curiosity was stronger than caution. Within minutes, he had already sent it to a friend at another hotel across town. The friend airdropped it to 2 more people sitting at another table. By the time the band started playing again, the clip had landed on social media. 3 tables, 3 uploads, and the fuse was lit. No one in that room knew it yet, but the world outside was about to meet Isla Rios, the bartender who danced for $10,000 and changed everything. The morning after the dance was nothing like the night before. The city that had sparkled under 1,000 lights was now cold and gray, painted with clouds that pressed low over the skyline. On Park Avenue, Damian Vale stood barefoot on the steel balcony of his penthouse, a cup of black coffee in his hand. The air bit at his skin, but he barely felt it. Inside his head, the image of Isla Rios would not fade. He saw her movements again and again, the strength in her silence, the story written across her body. For a man used to winning, it was the first time in years that victory felt like shame. Across the city, miles uptown in Washington Heights, Isla sat on a rattling fire escape with her own cup of coffee from the corner bodega. The steam rose between her fingers as she stared at the waking streets below. Damian's penthouse looked more like a museum than a home, minimalist, sharp, and silent. Yet, this morning, The stillness felt heavy. He hadn't slept. The whiskey from the night before sat untouched beside his bed. Inside his mind, he kept replaying her final pose, the defiant chin raised toward him, the entire room standing, and her walking away without a glance. His pride, once a polished weapon, now felt like a wound. He took another sip of coffee, but it tasted bitter, like the truth that had settled in his chest. Somewhere below, New York moved on. Horns honked, sirens wailed, taxis splashed through puddles. But Damian remained stuck in that moment, trapped between arrogance and awakening. A soft chime pulled him from his thoughts. Amelia Cho, his chief of staff, appeared on the glass door leading to the balcony. "You need to see this," she said. Her tone was calm, but her eyes held something close to disbelief. Damian followed her into his sleek living room where the television screen glowed. A video was playing. The headline read, "Billionaire dares bartender to dance. You won't believe what happens next." His stomach tightened. The footage was shaky but clear. Isla standing barefoot under the golden light, the crowd silent, her movements cutting through the air. Amelia lowered the volume. "It hit 1 million views overnight," she said. #BartenderDance is trending everywhere. There are interview requests, podcasts, talk shows. Everyone wants a statement. Damian stared at the screen, feeling his chest sink. "Turn it off," he whispered. "Do you want me to issue a response?" Amelia asked carefully. Damian shook his head. "Not yet. Not from us." He rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of his name attached to something ugly. "Order a quiet background check," he said after a pause. "I need to know who she is, education, family, where she works, hospital records if possible. But no outreach. No offers. No money. Just facts." Amelia hesitated but nodded. She had seen him ruthless before, but this tone was different, softer, almost uncertain. "Understood," she said and left the room. Damian turned back to the blank TV screen, now dark and reflecting his own tired face. For once, he didn't like what he saw. Meanwhile, in Washington Heights, Isla climbed the stairs to her small apartment, the kind where the walls held conversations from every neighbor. She unlocked the door quietly. Her roommate, Jenna Park, was still half asleep on the couch, a laptop glowing on her knees. "You're on the internet," Jenna mumbled without looking up. "Everywhere." Isla sighed, setting her bag down. "Please don't tell me that." But Jenna turned the laptop toward her anyway. The video was on every platform: TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. Isla's face filled the frame, her hair loose, eyes blazing. The comments were flooding in, "This is art." Who is she? The billionaire got served. Isla's stomach twisted. "Turn it off," she said softly. "I don't want to see it." Jenna looked at her, concerned. "You went viral, Isla. People are offering interviews, scholarships, maybe even dance companies." Isla shook her head and rubbed her temples. "It's not fame, Jenna. It's exposure. They don't care about the story. They care about the drama." She picked up the mug Jenna had left on the table and sipped the cold tea, her hands shaking slightly. "Mateo's appointment is today," she said quietly. "That's what matters." Jenna nodded, though her eyes flicked back to the laptop screen. The notifications were endless, hundreds of messages from strangers, fans, and opportunists alike. The world had discovered Isla Rios overnight, and it didn't plan to let her rest. At New York Presbyterian Hospital, the bright halls smelled of antiseptic and rain. Isla pushed open the door to room 204, where her younger brother Mateo lay surrounded by medical equipment. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "You're famous," he said, grinning despite the 4 in his arm. Isla laughed softly, sitting by his side. "Don't believe everything you see online, champ." Mateo shrugged. "The nurse showed me the video. You looked like a superhero." She brushed his hair back. "Superheroes don't get tired, and I'm exhausted." He squeezed her hand. "Did you at least get the money?" She nodded. "Yes, and I already know where it's going." She didn't tell him it was his next round of therapy. He didn't need to carry that weight. Back on Park Avenue, Amelia returned with a folder. Damian sat behind his black glass desk, the morning light reflecting off the skyline behind him. "Here's what we found," she said, placing it in front of him. He flipped it open. The report was short, clinical, devastating. Isla Rios, age 26. Former student, Alvin Ailey/Fordham BFA dance program. Withdrew in second year after family tragedy. Legal guardian of brother, Mateo Rios, age 13, diagnosed with systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Ongoing medical treatment estimated at $320,000 in debt. Parents deceased. Works multiple jobs, bartender, part-time cleaner. Residence, Washington Heights. Damian stared at the pages, each line cutting deeper. He whispered to himself, I turned her private grief into a room trick. For the first time in years, guilt hit him like a blow. Amelia watched him silently. You can fix it, she said finally. Damian shook his head. No. Money won't fix this. I already paid her once, and look what that turned into. He closed the file and leaned back, covering his face with his hands. I humiliated someone who has nothing, just to feel powerful. His voice trembled with something unfamiliar, regret. Amelia hesitated before speaking again. The press will twist the story. You know how this goes. If you make a move now, it'll look like PR cleanup. Damian nodded slowly. Then I'll stay silent, for now. But silence doesn't mean doing nothing. Amelia didn't ask what he meant. She could see that his mind was already turning, but this time, it wasn't for profit. At the hospital, Isla met with Dr. Anjali Sharma, a kind woman with calm eyes and a voice that always sounded reassuring. Mateo's next therapy is scheduled for Monday, the doctor said gently. But I have to warn you, it's expensive. Insurance won't cover it. Isla's heart sank. How much? Dr. Sharma hesitated before answering, $9,800. Just under what you earned last night. Isla looked down, her throat tight. Then it's covered, she said softly. I'll make the transfer today. The doctor smiled, touched by her quiet strength. You're a good sister, Isla. But Isla didn't feel good. She felt hollow, like a performer who had given everything and received applause instead of peace. Later that evening, Isla sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. The hospital's payment page glowed faintly in the dark room. She typed in her card number, the same card that held the $10,000 Damian had transferred to her account. When the confirmation email appeared, she exhaled shakily. The money was gone, but Mateo's treatment was safe for now. A small victory, maybe the only one she'd get. She closed the laptop and unplugged the Wi-Fi router, sliding it into a drawer. No more screens, she whispered to herself. She reached for a pen and a legal pad, scribbling down Mateo's next appointments, medication doses, and dates. Writing by hand calmed her. It reminded her of simpler days, before debt and fame and billionaires with cruel games. In the following days, the world wouldn't leave her alone. News channels replayed her dance with dramatic headlines. One said, "Billionaire humiliates bartender." Another countered, "Hidden prodigy silences Wall Street." Social media split into two camps, those who pitied her and those who admired her. Neither understood her. Gordon Pierce, her manager, sent her a text that morning, "Take 2 paid shifts off. We're proud of you." Patrons sent flowers. Isla stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Thank you, Gordon. I just need quiet." Even praise felt heavy now. She wanted the noise to stop, but fame was louder than ever. Meanwhile, Damian ignored the flood of emails from publicists and news anchors begging for comment. His company's reputation was on the line, yet he couldn't bring himself to speak. The thought of turning this story into another opportunity disgusted him. Amelia sat across from him in the conference room. "You can't hide forever," she said gently. "If you say anything, it has to be about her, not you." Damian nodded. "I won't give interviews. No statements. No spin. If I care, I'll prove it quietly." Amelia smiled faintly. "That's a start." When she left, Damian walked to the window overlooking Central Park. The view was beautiful, but he barely saw it. For once, his thoughts weren't about profits or mergers. They were about a woman who had shown him what dignity looked like. That night, as the city lights blinked outside her window, Isla sat beside Mateo's bed, reading aloud from his favorite comic book. He listened, half asleep, smiling. She traced his fingers gently and whispered, "Everything's going to be fine, little man." But she didn't fully believe it. When he drifted off, she stepped into the hallway, pulling her coat tighter. For the first time in years, she felt exposed, not by poverty, but by visibility. Everyone knew her name now, but not her story. She was a symbol to strangers, but to herself, she was still just Isla, someone trying to survive. As midnight came, two lives remained awake on opposite sides of the city. In the penthouse, Damian closed his laptop, the news still buzzing quietly in the background. In the walk-up, Isla turned off the last light, her handwritten schedule neatly folded beside her bed. Neither spoke, neither planned their next move. Yet both had chosen a path. Hers led toward protection, of her brother, her peace, her boundaries. His led toward atonement, quiet, unseen, but determined. And though they didn't know it yet, those two paths, once divided by pride and pain, were slowly, inevitably beginning to cross again. The morning sun was sharp and white, cutting across the streets of Washington Heights as Damian Vale pulled up to the curb in his black Audi. There was no chauffeur this time, no tinted convoy, no expensive suit to announce who he was. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, his hair unstyled, his watch left on the nightstand at home. For the first time in years, he wanted to look like no one, just a man with a mistake to fix. He sat in the car for a while, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. The street was alive with ordinary life. Children chasing a ball, a vendor selling churros, a woman arguing with a taxi driver. Damian had spent his entire life above this world, looking down from glass towers. Now he was here, and the air felt heavier, more honest. He stepped out of the car, holding a small envelope in his hand. There was no company letterhead, no gold seal, just plain white paper folded twice. He walked toward the brown brick building with the number 412 painted above the door. The steps creaked slightly under his polished shoes. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 4B. The sound buzzed faintly through the hallway. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice came through the speaker, sharp, cautious, female. "Who is it?" Damian cleared his throat. "I'm here to speak with Isla Rios," he said, his voice low, unsure. "It's Damian Vale." There was a long pause, then the door clicked but didn't open. The lock stayed in place. A figure appeared behind the glass door. Jenna Park stood there in sweats and a loose t-shirt, her hair tied back, eyes fierce. She recognized him instantly from the viral videos. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," she said, crossing her arms. Damian didn't argue. "I just need 5 minutes," he said softly. Jenna shook her head. "You've done enough damage." She finally slept last night, the first time in days. "You show up, and this turns into another circus." Damian lowered his gaze, his grip tightening on the envelope. "I didn't come to make noise," he said. "I came to leave something." Jenna studied him for a moment, surprised by his calm. She opened the door just enough for him to slide the envelope through the gap. "Don't turn up the circus," she said again. Damian nodded, stepping back. "I won't." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note. The paper was creased, his writing uneven but legible. It said only 5 words, "I'm sorry. This is my number." Beneath it was a phone number he actually answered himself, not his assistant's or office line. No company logo, no apology letter typed by lawyers, just human words written by a trembling hand. As he walked back to his car, Damian felt strange. Vulnerable, but relieved. He had spent his life surrounded by people who could fix anything with money, but this he couldn't outsource. He started the engine and drove off, heading toward the hospital downtown. His chest was tight, his thoughts looping around the same sentence. What does real repair even look like? At New York Presbyterian Hospital, the cafeteria smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Isla sat across from Dr. Anjali Sharma, her brother's lead specialist. The doctor's face was kind, but her words carried weight. "The next round of biologic therapy is due Monday," she said carefully. "But the hospital support fund is empty right now. We'll have to bill you directly this time." Isla nodded slowly, already calculating. "How much?" Dr. Sharma hesitated. $9,500. Isla looked down at her hands. The money was gone. She had already used the $10,000 from Damian to pay for Mateo's last treatment. There was nothing left. "Can I have a few days?" she asked. The doctor nodded. "We'll hold off until Wednesday, but after that," her voice trailed off. Isla forced a smile. "Thank you, doctor. I'll find a way." When she left the hospital cafeteria, Isla checked her phone. There was a text from an unknown number. "This is Damian. I left you a note. I know you don't owe me anything, but please let me meet you. Anywhere you choose." Isla stared at the message for a long time. Her first instinct was to delete it, but something about the tone made her pause. It wasn't arrogant or demanding. It sounded tired, almost honest. She typed back, J. Hoodwright Park. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. and hit send. Jenna found her later that night folding Mateo's clothes. "You're not seriously meeting him?" she asked, incredulous. "I need to," Isla said quietly. "I want to hear what he thinks an apology sounds like." Jenna sighed. "Fine. But promise me you'll keep it short." Isla nodded. Short and final. The next morning, the park was calm, the air crisp and bright. Children laughed near the playground, while pigeons pecked at crumbs near the benches. Isla sat on the far side, away from the noise, wrapped in her brown coat. She looked like she hadn't slept, but her eyes were steady. Damian arrived a few minutes later, walking alone, no assistant in sight. He looked different, no tailored suit, no arrogance in his stride. Just a man who had learned something the hard way. He stopped a few feet away. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," he said quietly. Isla nodded, her hands tucked into her pockets. "Let's get this over with," she replied, her voice calm but distant. Damian sat on the bench beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I came to say I'm sorry," he began. "Not as a CEO, not as a man trying to fix things with money. Just as a human being who acted like a fool." He took a slow breath. "I humiliated you for entertainment. I used my power to make you small because it made me feel big. That's the truth. No excuses. No but." Isla's eyes flicked toward him. The honesty caught her off guard. She had expected excuses or self-defense, but his voice was quiet and real. For a moment, the tension softened, but only for a moment. "You can't undo it," she said simply. "You made a spectacle of my pain." "I know," Damian said, nodding. "But I want to make it right. I can cover everything. Your brother's medical bills, your rent, whatever you need. You don't have to struggle anymore." Isla froze, her face tightening. "There it is," she said quietly. "The transaction." Her voice cracked, not from anger but from exhaustion. "You still think money fixes everything. My life isn't a receipt, Damian." He looked down, stung but silent. "You think paying my bills erases what you did? It doesn't. You don't buy forgiveness. You earn it by staying away." Damian swallowed hard. "Then tell me how. Tell me how to make this right without money." Isla's gaze stayed on the skyline. "Listen," she said. "Stop shaping other people's lives to fit your lesson plans. You don't fix pain by owning it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the wind through the trees filled the space between them. Isla reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the folded note he had left at her door. She held it out to him. "Take this back," she said softly. "I don't need your number. What I need is distance." Damian hesitated, then took the note. "I understand," he said, his voice low. "Thank you for telling me." He stood slowly. "You don't owe me forgiveness," he added. "But I'm grateful you gave me the chance to say what I needed to say." Isla nodded. "Just don't come back here again." Her tone wasn't cruel. It was firm, final, protective. As Damian walked away, he felt something strange, a sense of release. He hadn't been forgiven, but he had been heard. And that was more than he deserved. When he reached the car, his phone buzzed. It was Amelia. "Well?" she asked. "How did it go?" Damian leaned against the door, closing his eyes. "She said no," he replied. And it felt right. Amelia was quiet for a moment. "That felt human," she said softly. Damian smiled faintly. "It feels like the first true thing I've done in years." He hung up, started the car, and drove off slowly, letting the city swallow him again. He didn't know where he was heading, just that it wasn't back to the life he'd lived before. Across the park, Isla sat still for a while, her heartbeat slowly settling. The meeting had left her drained but lighter. There was something freeing about saying no, about refusing to be turned into another one of his lessons. She pulled out her phone and called Jenna. "It's over," she said softly. He didn't push. Jenna exhaled on the other end. "Good," she said. "Now we can breathe." Isla smiled faintly. "Yeah, finally." She stood, brushed the dust from her coat, and began walking toward the hospital. The trees swayed above her, their leaves whispering in the cold air. For the first time in days, the world didn't feel like it was watching her. It was just her again, one woman trying to find peace in a noisy city. That afternoon, as Isla walked through the hospital halls, her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Dr. Anjali Sharma. The subject line read, "Update on billing." Isla opened it quickly, her heart skipping. The message was short but powerful. "Hi Isla, the hospital administration has extended your billing grace period by 72 hours. Some new support fund just came through. Don't worry about the immediate payment. Mateo's next therapy will proceed as planned. See you Monday. Dr. Sharma." Isla stopped walking, her mouth slightly open. Relief washed through her like a wave. She hadn't asked for help, yet help had arrived anyway. "Thank you," she whispered under her breath, not knowing who she was thanking. She called Jenna that evening. "You won't believe this," she said, her voice shaking with relief. The hospital extended Mateo's payment deadline. They said a new fund came through. Jenna's eyebrows shot up. "That's suspiciously lucky," she said. "You think Vale had something to do with it?" Isla frowned. "No. He said he'd respect my distance." She paused, thinking, maybe it's just grace for once. Jenna smiled softly. "Then take it. You've earned a little grace." Isla nodded. "Yeah, I think I have." She hung up and looked out the window. The city glowed under the night sky, endless and indifferent. But for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen by life itself, not by headlines. Meanwhile, across town, Damian sat in his apartment, his laptop open but untouched. The folder with Isla's information lay beside it. He didn't look at it again. Instead, he opened a new email to an anonymous contact at the hospital's finance department. "Fund the pediatric rheumatology program. Keep it confidential. No recognition. No credit." He pressed send and closed the laptop. He wasn't looking for redemption anymore. He was building it quietly. The city lights flickered against the glass, casting faint reflections on his face. Two people miles apart, both finally breathed easier that night, one letting go of guilt, the other accepting a mercy she didn't understand. Isla didn't connect the dots yet, and maybe she never would. But Damian was already moving the invisible pieces, choosing for once not to be seen, only to do what was right. The boardroom at Vale Capital didn't look the same that morning. The usual faces, bankers, investors, and analysts, were nowhere to be found. Instead, the long glass table was surrounded by people from worlds that rarely mixed with money. A medical director, a dance therapist, a non-profit strategist, an architect, and a compliance lawyer sat waiting. Damian Vale entered without his usual entourage. Gone was the cold mask of the billionaire who moved markets. In its place was a man who had learned the price of arrogance. He stood at the head of the table, his voice quiet but clear. "We're not here to talk about profit," he said. "We're here to build something that fixes what money broke." A few eyebrows rose, but no one interrupted. On the screen behind him, a name appeared in white letters, the Phoenix Initiative. Damian paced slowly as he explained. The Phoenix Initiative will support artists, dancers, musicians, actors, who've had their dreams shattered by life, injury, or circumstance. It will also help cover emergency medical care for people who can't afford it. "This isn't charity for headlines," he said firmly. "It's repair work." Amelia Cho took notes, her pen moving fast across the page. At the other end of the table sat Isla Rios, a strategist who had spent 15 years building arts nonprofits across the country. "We'll need structure," she said. "Strict governance. Transparency. No favoritism." Damian nodded. "Exactly. Anonymous disbursements. third-party oversight, and a permanent endowment. The air in the room shifted. For the first time, Vale Capital felt like a place where compassion, not competition, was being calculated. At the far corner of the table, a broad-shouldered man with rolled-up sleeves spread out a blueprint. His name was Marcus Feld, an architect known for designing hospitals and rehab centers that didn't feel like prisons. "If this is going to be real," Marcus said, "it needs a home." He unfolded the plans, an outline for a combined performance and rehabilitation space in Hell's Kitchen, just blocks from the theater district. "The front half will be a performance hall for small shows," he explained. "The back half will be a physical therapy and mental health facility. The same place that restores the body should also restore the soul." Damian looked down at the design, tracing the lines with his finger. "Build it," he said quietly. "No marble, no gold. Just hope." Talia leaned forward, her eyes bright. "If you really want this to work, we need fair selection criteria," she said. "No PR games, no influencer nonsense. Artists will be referred by schools, hospitals, and community centers. That keeps it pure." Damian smiled faintly. "Pure sounds good." Priya Nair, his financial director, added, "We'll need to guarantee independence. No one should ever connect this to Vale Capital." Amelia lifted her pen. "I'll handle the firewall," she said. "Every donation will come from a subsidiary, not from your personal name. The board will be non-profit and independently audited. No quid pro quo, no press releases." Damian exhaled, relieved. "Do it," he said. "Every rule we need to keep it clean." For once, control didn't mean manipulation, it meant integrity. As the meeting continued, the whiteboard filled with lists, partners, schools, hospitals, and pilot programs. Damian sat silently for a while, listening. It was strange, being in a room where every idea wasn't about money. For the first time in his career, he wasn't leading with dominance but with curiosity. "This will take months," Oliver Hart said cautiously. "And a lot of your own cash." Damian didn't blink. "Then it's worth it." The others exchanged quiet glances. They were used to seeing him destroy, not build. He leaned back, his voice softer now. "I owe the world a better version of me," he said simply. No one argued. The meeting ended not with applause, but with resolve. Everyone left with a new kind of assignment, one that could actually heal instead of harm. That afternoon, Damian made a call from his private office, his voice steady but low. "Dr. Sharma?" he asked when she answered. "Yes, speaking." Her tone carried professional caution. "This is Damian Vale," he said. "You don't know me personally, but you're treating a young patient named Mateo Rios." There was a pause on the line. "Yes," she said carefully. "What about him?" Damian continued, "A corporate subsidiary of mine will fund a multi-year grant to your pediatric rheumatology program. No names attached. Full patient access fund. Effective immediately." Dr. Sharma blinked, her breath catching. "Mr. Vale, this could change everything for our unit." Damian smiled faintly. "Then it's done. And please, don't tell the family where it came from." When the call ended, Dr. Sharma sat stunned. Mateo's next treatment was now certain, and free. At that same moment, Amelia was in her office drafting the documents that would legally bind Damian's promise. Every clause was airtight. The Phoenix Initiative would exist beyond his lifetime, protected from misuse or vanity. She emailed the final review to Priya and Talia with a single note: "This is what atonement looks like." Downstairs, the Vale Capital press team was unaware of any of it. There were no announcements, no logos, no press invites. Damian's plan was simple: let the work speak quietly, let it live louder than his name. He looked at the first official document, his signature line empty at the bottom. His hand hovered before he signed, and for once, he felt no fear of losing. He was giving something away, not to gain, but to finally rest. When the official confirmation from the hospital came through, Dr. Sharma called her assistant, her voice trembling. "Update the file for Mateo Rios," she said. "His therapy is confirmed for Monday. Full coverage. No delay." Her assistant blinked. "But who approved it?" Dr. Sharma smiled faintly. "A good mystery," she replied. Across the city, Isla sat at home unaware of the miracle unfolding behind the scenes. While she folded her brother's clothes and prepared for his next appointment, someone she once hated had quietly removed the weight from her shoulders. Damian didn't need her thanks. He just needed to know the child would be okay. It was the first true act that didn't need to be seen to matter. 2 weeks later, the next phase began. Amelia gathered a small team in the planning offices of the David H. Koch Theater at Lincoln Center. The air buzzed with creative energy as Talia outlined her idea for the first Phoenix Gala. "It won't be a fundraiser," she said firmly. "It'll be a showcase, a stage for the very people we're helping. Their work, their art, their healing." Marcus nodded, already sketching the set design. "I'll keep the stage clean and simple," he said. "Focus on the performers." Amelia smiled. "Exactly. No speeches from billionaires, no golden plaques. Just art." The others laughed lightly, but they understood the weight of that rule. Damian's name would never appear on the program. This wasn't his redemption story, it belonged to everyone else. Securing the theater wasn't easy, but Damian had friends in the arts who trusted his new purpose. Within a week, the dates were confirmed, and the Phoenix Gala was set for the end of the season. Talia began contacting small dance schools, music therapy groups, and local rehabilitation centers. "We want real stories," she said to each one. "Not fame, not pity, just truth." The performers began rehearsing in borrowed studios, their excitement genuine. For some, it would be their first time on a real stage since injury or illness had ended their dreams. The energy around the project was different. It wasn't loud or corporate. It was human, messy, beautiful. In the quiet corners of Lincoln Center, hope had started taking form, one rehearsal at a time. Back at Vale Capital, Oliver Hart and Priya Nair reviewed the finances for the Phoenix Initiative. The numbers were staggering. "You're committing $100 million of your personal assets," Priya said, her tone a mix of awe and concern. "That's not an investment, Damian. That's a surrender." Damian smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what it takes." Oliver leaned forward. "And what if Isla never speaks to you again? What if she never even knows?" Damian looked out the window, watching the city move. "Then it still matters," he said softly. "This was never about her forgiveness. It's about fixing the system that broke people like her in the first place." The two men fell silent. They knew he meant it. For once, Damian's ambition wasn't pointed upward, it was reaching outward. By late afternoon, Damian sat in his office, handwriting a single letter. The paper was thick, the ink slightly smudged from his hand. The words were simple: "This isn't charity. It's a stage, if you ever want it. D." He sealed it in an unmarked envelope and handed it to a private courier. "Deliver this to Washington Heights," he said. "No signature required. No press. Just the mailbox." The courier nodded and left. Damian leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even an invitation. It was a promise that if Isla ever chose to return to her art, she would find the doors already open. He didn't expect an answer. Sometimes, real apologies weren't meant to be answered at all. Meanwhile, the rehearsals for the gala had begun to bloom. Talia mentored a group of young dancers, many of whom had battled injuries or abandonment in the industry. "You're not broken," she told them during warm-ups. "You're rebuilding." Marcus oversaw construction at the new Hell's Kitchen site, his blueprints coming to life in steel and light. Amelia managed compliance, ensuring every penny was traceable and every donor anonymous. Damian stopped by occasionally, not to inspect but to observe. He stayed in the back of the rehearsal hall, unnoticed, watching people rediscover their voices through movement and music. It reminded him of Isla's dance, the strength hidden in vulnerability. This was what redemption looked like when it wasn't performed. Days passed, and momentum grew. The press caught whispers of the Phoenix Initiative, but couldn't trace its source. "Some mysterious backer is funding a performing arts revival," one article read. Damian ignored them all. Talia was the face of the project, and that was how he wanted it. The focus stayed on the artists, the children, and the survivors. There was no talk of billionaires or scandals, only stories of healing and resilience. In a private moment, Amelia looked at Damian and said, "You realize you've done more good in a month of silence than in a decade of noise?" He smiled. Maybe silence was what I needed all along. But just as things began to settle, the outside world stirred again. During a meeting at Lincoln Center, a young reporter stopped Talia in the hallway. "Is it true that the Phoenix Initiative is connected to Damian Vale?" she asked, her pen ready. Talia smiled politely. "The initiative belongs to no one," she said. "It belongs to those it helps." The reporter frowned, unconvinced. That same afternoon, word reached a woman named Nina Volkov, a rival dancer known for her hunger for fame. She read the leaked news and smirked. "A secret gala? With anonymous funding," she said to herself. "Sounds like an opportunity." While Damian built quietly for healing, somewhere else, ambition was waking up again, and it was already looking toward his light. The Phoenix Gala was only days away, and the halls of Lincoln Center were alive with rehearsals. Music spilled out from practice rooms, dancers stretched across wooden floors, and stagehands adjusted lights that shimmered like stars above the empty theater. Backstage, Talia Reyes kept everything moving with calm authority, while Amelia handled the administrative chaos. Damian stayed quiet, watching from the shadows, content to see others shine. But not everyone wanted peace. Across the rehearsal hall, Nina Volkov stood by the coffee table, perfectly dressed, her smile just a little too sweet. She was a rising contemporary soloist, famous for her ambition and infamous for her cruelty. When she noticed a young PR aide carrying a list of performers, her sharp instincts kicked in. "Is it true?" she asked casually, lowering her voice. "I heard the bartender from that viral video might be performing." The aide froze, unsure whether to answer. Nina's curiosity was poison-dressed as politeness. She leaned closer, her tone honeyed. "Come on, you can tell me," she whispered. "People are dying to know if Damian Vale is dragging that poor woman into the spotlight again. It would make quite the story." The PR aide hesitated, then stammered, I can't confirm anything, Miss Volkov. The lineup is private." Nina smiled, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Private? That's boring. Audiences like drama." She turned away, pretending to lose interest, but inside, her mind was already scheming. Minutes later, she stepped outside, pulled out her phone, and typed a message to a gossip columnist she knew at a popular entertainment tabloid. Rumor: billionaire Damian Vale exploiting unstable bartender for clout at his secret gala. Heard she might perform unwillingly. "Call me." She hit send with a grin. Chaos, she knew, always found a hungry audience. The next morning, the headlines spread like wildfire. "Billionaire exploits viral bartender for sympathy project." It was everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, morning talk shows. The accompanying photo showed Damian at a construction site for the Phoenix Center, next to a blurry screenshot of Isla Middance. The article claimed she was being pressured into performing to save Vale's reputation. It was a lie, but lies always travel faster than truth. At Lincoln Center, Amelia's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted statements. Bloggers wanted quotes. Inside the rehearsal hall, dancers murmured to each other, the tension growing. Talia slammed her tablet on the table. "This is garbage," she said. "Who started this?" Amelia pinched her nose. "Doesn't matter. We say nothing. Damian's orders, no comment, stick to the program." The words were firm, but her eyes showed worry. Scandals had a way of stealing the spotlight from those who deserved it. When Talia finally stormed into Damian's temporary office, she was furious. "We built this to help people, and now it's turning into another billionaire headline," she snapped. "Someone's sabotaging us." Damian looked up from the desk, calm but tired. "Then let them," he said. "We don't feed it. We focus on the artists. That's the only truth that matters." Talia wanted to argue, but stopped when she saw his expression. He wasn't defensive. He was steady, composed, changed. "You're serious," she said, "even if they drag your name again?" Damian nodded. "Especially then." Amelia stepped in, holding a folder. "The stage program's secure. I've told every staff member, no leaks, no responses." Damian leaned back. "Good. Let our silence speak louder than gossip." He turned toward the theater window, where rehearsals continued in the distance. The moment we start explaining, we lose the story's soul. Meanwhile, far away in Bushwick, Isla Rios unlocked the door to a small rented studio on Wyckoff Avenue. The space was rough, scuffed floors, cracked mirrors, and a single flickering light overhead, but it was hers for 2 hours. She set down her bag, plugged in her phone, and played the only track she could afford to buy, a single cello line, deep and haunting, looping endlessly. The music filled the empty space as she stretched her arms and closed her eyes. Her mind was calm for a moment, until her phone buzzed on the floor. She ignored it at first, then reluctantly picked it up. The screen glowed with notifications. Her stomach dropped as she saw the headline. The words hit her like ice. Billionaire exploits viral bartender for sympathy project. Her hands trembled. The past, it seemed, had found her again. Isla scrolled down, reading the lies. The article described her as emotionally unstable and easily influenced. It said Damian was using her image to rebuild his reputation. Her heart pounded with anger, and then she saw it, the writer's name. Sasha Vinogradov. A familiar connection. Sasha was Nina Volkov's favorite gossip contact, the same one who had leaked their school feud years ago at Ailey. Isla clenched her jaw, memories flooding back. Nina's smirks, her fake compliments, the way she had always turned envy into cruelty. Isla closed her eyes and took a long, steady breath. "So it's you again," she whispered. But this time, the fear was gone. All that remained was resolve. She grabbed her worn dance shoes, then hesitated. Slowly, she placed them back in her bag and stepped onto the cold floor barefoot. "If I'm going," she murmured, "I'm going as myself." Across town, Lincoln Center buzzed with final preparations. The orchestra was tuning, the dancers running last-minute sequences, and Talia was finalizing the lighting cues. In a quiet corner, Damian sat reviewing the lineup when Amelia rushed in. "We might have a situation," she said. "Security just called. Isla Rios is at the entrance." Damian froze, looking up. "She's here." Amelia nodded. She gave her name to the guards. They checked the list and found the invitation you sent. "She's waiting." Damian stood, unsure for a second what to do. "Bring her in," he said finally. Quietly. No press, no announcement. Amelia smiled faintly. Already taken care of. A few minutes later, Isla stepped through the side doors, her coat draped over her arm, her bare feet leaving faint marks on the polished floor. The rehearsal chatter dimmed. Even silence seemed to recognize her. Talia turned, surprised but not displeased. "You came," she said warmly. Isla nodded. "I came for the art, not the noise." Nina Volkov, stretching nearby, nearly dropped her water bottle when she saw Isla. Her face drained of color, the memory of their rivalry flashing across her mind. She whispered under her breath, "You shouldn't be here." Isla ignored her and walked toward Amelia. "What do you need?" Amelia asked gently. Isla met her eyes. "A floor," she said. And silence. The simplicity of her request hit Amelia like a stone. "You'll have both," she replied. Talia immediately began rearranging the schedule. "We'll call it Phoenix, unscripted." Damian, who had stayed in the back, watched quietly. Their eyes met for a brief second, not in apology, but in understanding. No words were needed. The stage, not speech, would do the talking. Backstage, the energy shifted. Dancers whispered, stagehands adjusted the lights, and the conductor glanced nervously toward the wings. Talia announced the change in the program, her tone professional but firm. "We're adding one more piece before the final act. Title, Phoenix, unscripted. Performer, Isla Rios." The room went still. Nina's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to Sasha, her gossip contact. "She's actually performing. It'll be worse than you thought." Sasha replied instantly. "Perfect. I'll have cameras waiting outside." Nina slid her phone back into her bag, her face calm again, as if nothing had happened. Across the hall, Isla stood alone, her eyes closed, steadying her breath. She wasn't here to fight or explain. She was here to reclaim her voice the only way she knew how, through movement. Damian walked up to her just before curtain call, careful to keep his distance. "You don't owe anyone anything tonight," he said quietly. Isla looked at him, her face unreadable. "I know," she said. That's why I'm here. For the first time, he smiled, not the polished grin of a businessman, but the faint, humble smile of a man who understood. Then we'll let the stage speak, he said softly. She nodded, and that was enough. A stagehand whispered that the lights were ready. The house beyond the curtains was packed. Critics, artists, journalists, and strangers. No one knew what was coming, least of all the woman who had once been humiliated for money. She took a slow breath, letting the sound of the cello tune in her memory guide her heartbeat. The stage manager called the cue. House lights down. The theater darkened, and a hush spread through the crowd. Backstage, the glow from the monitors cast soft light on Isla's calm face. She stepped barefoot onto the cold wood of the stage, her body lit by a single cone of white light from above. The orchestra pit was silent. No music, no introduction, no announcement. Just stillness. From the wings, Damian watched, his hands clenched at his sides, knowing this wasn't about him anymore. Amelia stood nearby, whispering to Talia, "This is her moment." Talia nodded. Yes. Let her burn and rise. The curtains parted slowly, and the audience gasped as Isla appeared alone, her shadow stretching long behind her. In the darkness beyond the light, Nina watched, her eyes sharp with envy. She had wanted the stage for herself, but now she would be forced to witness someone else earn it. She crossed her arms, pretending not to care, but her heart raced. "Let's see if she still has it," she muttered. In the press seats, two journalists leaned forward, ready to record every second. They had come for gossip, not grace, but what they were about to witness would change everything they thought they knew. The theater's silence deepened until it felt like breath itself was waiting. Isla stood in the center of the light, her body perfectly still. Then, slowly, she lifted her arms. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from power held too long inside. She moved once, twice, then again, small deliberate motions that built like a storm. Each movement carved through the light, pulling the audience closer. It wasn't just a dance. It was testimony. Every twist of her wrist, every fall to the floor told a story of dignity that refused to die. From the shadows, Damian's eyes softened. Amelia pressed her hand to her heart. Even Talia's steady professionalism cracked into awe. Behind the curtain, Nina clenched her fists. Her plan had been to expose Isla, to paint her as a puppet for a billionaire's redemption story. But what unfolded on stage shattered that lie. The woman before the crowd wasn't a victim. She was power itself. The audience was transfixed, every breath synchronized with hers. By the time Isla's body stilled again under the white cone of light, the theater was silent, but not empty. Something sacred lingered in the air, a truth too large for words. In the wings, Damian exhaled a breath he didn't know he was holding. Nina's phone buzzed with Sasha's question, "How bad is it?" She typed one word before slipping the phone into her pocket, "Beautiful." The curtain lowered slowly, and the applause began, not wild but reverent like a prayer. Backstage, Isla stood motionless, eyes closed, letting the sound wash over her. She wasn't smiling, but peace radiated from her face. Damian didn't approach her, not yet. He simply watched, understanding that some victories aren't his to share. Talia turned to Amelia, her voice hushed. "That wasn't on the program," she said. Amelia smiled softly. Maybe it was never supposed to be. Outside the theater, cameras flashed, hungry for a scandal, but they would find none. All they would capture was a woman walking barefoot into the night, her silence more powerful than any statement. And as the city lights glowed above Lincoln Center, everyone who had been inside knew one truth. The phoenix had already begun to rise. The house lights dimmed until only a faint glow traced the edges of the stage. The air inside the David H. Koch Theater was charged with a strange, still electricity. Isla Rios stood barefoot in the center of that stage, her breath deep and calm, her heartbeat steady. The audience held its own breath with her. No one moved, not even a whisper. This wasn't a performance, it was a reckoning. She began in stillness, letting the silence settle like dust. Her first step landed like a verdict, a sound so soft yet final that the entire hall seemed to tremble. She didn't need music or fanfare. Every motion carried the weight of her truth. Her posture wasn't defensive anymore. It was commanding. Tonight was not about rage. It was about mastery, about taking back what had once been taken from her. Her movement unfolded like conversation, each gesture deliberate, grounded, controlled. There was no desperation in her body, only purpose. Her arms extended outward, not to plead but to declare. Her lines were long and unbroken, her balances unwavering, her turns sharp and complete. She didn't rush. Every breath, every lift of her chin, reminded the audience that she owned this space now. The pain that had once shaped her was still there, but she carried it differently, like a sculptor who had learned to carve beauty from the hardest stone. Each motion carried the quiet message, I was never yours to buy. I was always my own. The audience leaned forward as if afraid to blink and miss something sacred. As the piece evolved, Isla began to build a repeating motif, a series of turns that stopped abruptly in perfect alignment, each halt clean as a blade's edge. The pattern told its own story, refusal transformed into agency. Every time she stopped mid-spin, it was as though she were cutting through the noise that once surrounded her life. Tabloids, gossip, pity, shame. Her body spoke in sentences clearer than any speech. No more. No permission needed. No apology owed. The lights shifted gradually, widening their reach until they bathed her in soft gold. She didn't flinch under their warmth. This time, she wasn't being exposed. She was illuminating herself. Midway through the performance, Isla moved into a diagonal run across the stage. It mirrored the bar dance that had changed her life months ago, but this time there was no humiliation behind it. The same gesture that once represented pain now symbolized power. The audience could feel the difference. The redemption was not loud but deeply human. Her footwork whispered across the polished floor, precise and intentional. The memory of that first dare still lived inside her body, but it no longer hurt. It was part of her choreography now, woven into her story. It had become fuel instead of a wound. She was no longer a symbol of someone else's mistake. She was her own masterpiece. From the wings, Eddie Mendez, her old colleague from the Halcyon Room, sat behind a small upright piano. He had been brought in quietly at Isla's request. He pressed a single key, releasing a soft, restrained melody that wound its way through the air. The tune didn't overpower her. It followed her like a companion. The piano's notes were steady, offering rhythm but never rescue. Isla moved with them, not against them, her bare feet striking the floor in time with the heartbeat of the sound. For the audience, it felt like watching healing happen in real time, a conversation between scars and strength, between the body and the soul. The final phrase came like dawn breaking. Isla lifted her arms, her gaze level and direct, her breathing deep but steady. She stopped center stage, her back straight, her chin raised. For a moment, she was motionless again, her silhouette outlined in white light. The silence afterward was thick, almost physical. It hung in the air for several heartbeats before a single clap broke it, then another, then a wave. The ovation rose like thunder. The crowd stood, their applause echoing through the grand hall, spilling upward into the balconies. People shouted her name, cried openly, and clapped until their hands hurt. But Isla didn't bow. She didn't need to. She simply nodded once, acknowledging not fame but freedom. When the noise finally began to fade, Isla Rios walked to the front of the stage. The microphone crackled softly. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm but steady. "Tonight, we are proud to announce the launch of the Phoenix Initiative, a foundation for artists and patients who need hope, not charity." The crowd applauded again. "It will provide scholarships, rehabilitation, and medical access for anyone whose art was interrupted by hardship," she continued. "There will be no donor names, no plaques, and no speeches about wealth, only action." Damian Vale listened from the wings, unseen. He didn't move forward. He didn't crave recognition. The mission spoke louder than he ever could. Amelia stood beside him, her eyes glistening, whispering, "You did it." He shook his head slightly. "We did it," he replied. Backstage, chaos turned to quiet pride. Dancers hugged, tech crews wiped tears, and staff members whispered congratulations. In one corner, Nina Volkov leaned against the wall, her perfect smile gone. She watched Isla walk by, her posture calm and dignified. "You really think this makes you a saint?" Nina muttered under her breath. Isla didn't even glance her way. She kept walking, her eyes fixed forward. For the first time in her life, Nina realized how powerless envy felt. Isla's silence said everything. It wasn't revenge, it was transcendence. Nina was no longer an obstacle or even a memory. She was just another echo in a story that had moved on. Down the stage door corridor, the crowd's applause still hummed faintly from beyond the walls. Damian waited near the exit, his hands clasped loosely. When Isla appeared, he straightened slightly but didn't approach. She stopped a few steps away. "Thank you for using the stage," he said quietly. "It was never mine," she replied. "You just opened the door." He nodded, accepting that truth. "Then I hope you'll keep walking through it," he said. "We need someone like you to help lead the Phoenix Initiative. Not as a symbol, but as an architect." Isla raised an eyebrow. "You mean a job?" Damian smiled faintly. "No. A partnership. Artistic advisor and co-founder, if you'll have it." Isla crossed her arms, thinking. "Then I have conditions," she said. "Transparency in everything. Artists lead the selections, not donors. Every medical fund is ring-fenced and untouchable. No one gets to use this for publicity. Not you, not anyone." Damian nodded without hesitation. "Done," he said. "No arguments." Isla asked, surprised. "No," he replied. "You're right." From behind them, Amelia appeared, holding a folder. "Already drafted," she said, smiling. "Talia and I made sure the safeguards were written in from day one." Isla accepted the folder, scanning it briefly. "Good," she said softly. "Then maybe this time, the system will work for the people who need it most." Damian met her eyes. That's the goal. There was no handshake yet, only mutual respect that felt stronger than any contract. They walked together toward the back exit. The corridor smelled faintly of stage dust and new paint. Outside, the plaza lights shimmered across the wide expanse of Lincoln Center. The iconic fountain roared gently in the background, throwing arcs of silver water into the night air. Isla stopped near its edge, taking out her phone. She tapped Mateo's name. Within seconds, her brother's smiling face appeared on the screen, hospital bed behind him. "Did it work?" he asked eagerly. Isla laughed softly, tears in her eyes. "It worked," she said. "You were loud without saying a word," Mateo grinned. "That's my sister." The screen flickered as he waved, his small hand bandaged but strong. Isla blew him a kiss, her heart full. "Get some rest," she whispered. "The world's waiting for you." When the call ended, she lowered her phone and looked out at the fountain. The city hummed around them, taxis honking in the distance, late-night chatter drifting from the nearby restaurants. Damian stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching the water catch the light. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Isla said quietly, "We're very different people." Damian nodded. "Yes," he said, "but we want the same thing now. To build something that matters." She smiled faintly. "Not to erase the past." He shook his head. "To grow beyond it." The words settled between them like an unspoken truce. No romance, no promises, just shared purpose. Amelia and Talia joined them briefly, carrying the signed papers in a folder. "It's official," Amelia said. "The Phoenix Initiative is live." Talia added, "And the press still doesn't know who funded it." Damian grinned slightly. "Let's keep it that way." Isla took the folder from them, holding it against her chest. "Then let's start with honesty," she said. "We'll make art, but we'll make it human." Amelia smiled. "That's why you belong here." Talia nodded in agreement. "You reminded us all why we started." Isla turned to Damian. "It's not about you anymore," she said. "And that's exactly why it's going to work." He laughed quietly, nodding. "I couldn't agree more." As the night deepened, the plaza began to empty. Stagehands packed away equipment, and the last guests filtered out, their laughter echoing faintly across the square. A gentle wind swept through, carrying one of the event posters from its stand. It flipped once, twice, then landed against a lamppost. Across its glossy surface were the words, "Some dances begin where pride ends." Isla watched it flutter for a moment before turning back toward the fountain. The reflection of the city lights shimmered in the water like endless possibilities. Beside her, Damian looked lighter, almost at peace. The weight he had carried, the guilt, the arrogance, the need for control, had finally dissolved into something quieter, purpose. They stood there in comfortable silence, two people who had been broken by the same event but rebuilt in different ways. Isla tucked her hair behind her ear, her bare feet brushing the cool marble edge of the fountain. "You know," she said softly, "maybe this was never about a dance." Damian looked at her, puzzled. Then what was it about? She smiled, eyes reflecting the city lights. About learning when to stop performing and start living. He nodded, the words sinking deep. The fountain spray shimmered like tiny stars, and the city around them moved on, alive, indifferent, beautiful. The Phoenix Initiative would carry forward without applause, without headlines, just quiet, steady work. And as Isla turned to leave, her reflection rippled on the water's surface, graceful and strong. The dance wasn't over. It had simply changed form.